Skoliswagwik. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and today we have Sarah and Leah from Oneida Family Services. They will be providing us information and awareness on child abuse and neglect. Oneida Family Services is aiming to provide information and resources during certain awareness months. I know this can be a hard topic, so if you have any questions or concerns, you can find resources and contact information in the description. Yawanko.
So we're here today to talk about April being National Child Abuse and Prevention Month. We're gonna bring it all together and talk about what it is, what child abuse and neglect is, what it looks like, and what kind of effects it can have on our children and our community, and what we can do to help prevent it. April, being Child Abuse and Neglect Month, is a time for us to all come together to raise awareness and to participate in activities that show a commitment to our children and our families within our communities. I believe that children are the foundation, are our foundation for, and literally they are our future. And without them, where would we be? There's literally no other people on this planet that are more important. I believe that when children are raised in loving and supportive environments, children are more likely to prosper academically, financially, and they are more likely to become successful, contributing members of our society. And much like a ripple in the water grows, so will these benefits of giving children loving and supportive environments. It'll ripple out into our and not only in their immediate family, but into our entire world. So today, I already explained what I'm here to talk about, how to recognize child abuse and neglect, and really the importance of bringing it into the light. Because so many years, child abuse and neglect was a topic that was swept underneath the rug, better left not talked about. And especially this year with the pandemic, we've seen a increase in child abuse and neglect reports. There's been a big increase with stress within the family unit. And we know that when families are stressed for a multitude of reasons, child abuse and neglect follows that. So our efforts to raise awareness around child abuse and neglect and its impacts are extra vital this year. So for April being Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month, communities across Wisconsin and in our entire nation, as a matter of fact, are wearing blue as a sign of a joint commitment to prioritizing our children and our families, to building the awareness throughout our communities.
And also here in our departments, we're engaging the community in awareness through a drive-through that is going to be next Thursday, I believe. A community drive-through, so that we can give people some pieces of education, and then we're also going to feed them, because we know that
people come when there's food.
Yeah, food's always a good thing, especially with Native people. So we're doing that here, right at our social services building.
Do you know what time that starts at?
It starts at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's in the morning.
8 o'clock on Thursday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I believe it's running until 10.
Till 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'll be dressed up as a sloth.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think Leah said that she was going to wear a costume. So
yeah.
Come one, come all.
Yeah. I'm going to be dressed as a sloth, and I'll be out there.
I believe that knowledge truly is key. So a piece of the event that we are putting on next week, Thursday, is going to be giving pieces of information out to the community. Yeah.
And there also will be social media presence too. So you will be seeing a lot more posts and a lot more social media engagements, like videos and shares, and especially like this too. This will also be available on YouTube and Facebook as well. We are hoping to do more of events typed like this with videos and audio pieces, just so we can get more awareness and more educational pieces out there. I know today we wanted to talk about a little bit about a test that helps you recognize childhood trauma. Do you
Mm-hmm.
want to explain a little bit more about
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah. So a piece of what I wanted to talk about today, guys, is the ACEs study, or Adverse Childhood Experiences study.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where can I find it? Hold on.
Do we know what ACEs stands for?
ACEs it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and the study focused on 10 factors that it's a measure of the toxic stress that children are exposed to in their childhood, and it really focused on the ages under age 6. And under age 6 is a critical time in a child's brain development. So the study focused on 10 key experiences that and the rest of the negative outcomes they have for a child. The key experiences that were focused on during this study were the 4 different types of abuse,
Mm-hmm.
which are neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse.
Okay.
They also studied effects on children who have parents who were incarcerated, living in dangerous and stressful environments, being a witness to violent crimes or domestic violence, living with a parent with a mental illness or a drug addiction or any type of addiction. And I do believe that they were adding some more to the list, and poverty being one of them. The study, I feel like the study really had made a profound impact on our entire nation, and it resulted in a switch in the approaches to childhood or child abuse and neglect. It really just showed how the toxic stress and early trauma affects a child on a biological level, and it delays their natural development. It hinders their ability to manage stress, and it actually can change a child's DNA. And that's just crazy. When I learned about that, I just it blew me away. So the study teaches us that children who were exposed to toxic stress, toxic stress of abuse and neglect, can suffer just prolonged lifelong consequences such as depression, anxiety, impulse control behaviors. Um, they have a greater likelihood to abuse substances, an increase in autoimmune disorders and cancers and heart diseases and stuff like that. Adult survivors, the study showed us that adult survivors of childhood abuse are more likely to have mental health diagnoses, PTSD, bipolar disorder, eating disorders, and really the studies show us that premature death is often a result of early childhood traumas. So you can really see how this huge study changed everybody's minds about, like, 25 years ago, child abuse and neglect was swept underneath the rug. And we didn't talk about it. And I believe that this is a study that just really started to bring it out into the light. And we look about how child abuse and neglect affects society as a whole. Well, because these children literally lose their childhood, lose their windows of opportunity for healthy growth and development. And then they grow up and go out into society without these vital skills that they need.
And then they have children, and then they don't have the tools or the skills they need to, well, first deal with the traumas that they had. So then those end up, I don't want to say transferring, but they end up trickling into, all of their daily lives, I'm assuming. And then when they're having children, if they're already stressed, and then they have children who, it's often can, even though we love them, they still can cause extra stress. And if they don't have the tools or skills to manage that, then it can lead to child abuse and neglect. And that's where as a case manager, that's where you see it, and myself as a coordinator as well.
Yeah.
with
Very
kiddos and
common.
then end up being in foster care.
Oftentimes it's parents who don't know any different. We only know what we know
That's their normal.
until
That's
we
how
know
they
what
were
we
raised.
know,
Yeah.
and we change. A lot of times we see parents just needing a parenting class. So, and I really connect it to some experiences in my own life, and how when I first started learning about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, um, a light just really went off for me when I learned that I had 7 out of 10 on the test that is given to people. And it connected some dots for me when I learned that I have, all these crazy health conditions at a young age, like high blood pressure, suffering from, struggling with weight issues, or um, smoking, drinking, dangerous, impulsive behavior, just that kind of stuff. It really connected the dots for me. I think, growing up, I would describe my house as my home environment as being angry and chaotic, unbalanced, unpredictable, sometimes violent and scary, loud, dirty, sad, lonely, and confusing. Um, and I have to think that, like, looking back, I know my parents only did what they knew. And I know there was some family members that knew what was going on in my house, but back then the motto was, "That's your business. I stay out of my business." And in this field that I'm working in, I still to this day hear people saying that
I was just
it's
gonna
not my
say, I think that
business.
that's part. I mean, and I think there's also with Native people, there's also a mistrust, and you know that's generational. From that goes all the
Mm-hmm.
way back, to our ancestors and boarding schools and those kinds of things. And so there's always a mistrust when it comes to um, they don't want to lose their kids, so they want to keep it quiet, and they might
Mm-hmm.
not feel comfortable. I mean, I don't know if you've experienced that when
Mm-hmm.
as a case manager where
Oh yeah,
maybe
yeah.
they're just not comfortable working with you
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have that trust there. They're afraid of disclosing things, and even though that might be helpful for them to get help and to build a relationship, to reunify their kids with them, they still, that's something that they've learned over from their parents
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
their grandparents and so on and so on.
For anybody listening that doesn't understand the little history, so after the boarding school era, through the Termination Act, or through the termination era, the philosophy of Pratt was to kill the Indian, save the man. And so when they were doing it through the boarding school, they took it one step further and used social workers to divide families. And it was called the Adoption Act, our era, where they were having Native children being adopted from non-Native families. And they were very aggressive with this approach. And with families that weren't willing to give up their children, they used social workers and these um, crazy extenuating circumstances that nearly every Native American household fell under at that time. Um, they they basically said that you fall under these elements, and that your kid is unfit to be raised by your Native American family, which Native American families at that time had a very much different standard than the general society standards. And so social workers were used as a tool to really divide a lot of Native American families. And that intergenerational trauma has dwindled down into what we see today, where there is that mistrust, but not understanding where that mistrust can lead to a little bit of ignorance. But like I said, that is intergenerational trauma that our people, not only Oneidas, but every Native American tribe across the United States has faced.
Mm-hmm. And to go along with that, you speak of historical trauma or intergenerational trauma can have the ability to affect a child's DNA too.
Mm-hmm.
And studies have shown that. It's just, it affects a person profoundly. And we see, as I talked about before, that ripple effect moving on out into our community, and it grows. And I think being a social worker or case manager, working with children in child protection, I learned that across the board there is a distrust of, they're going to come in, they're just going to rip my kids away from me. Media, society, that is what people believe. And I know, I put my heart and soul into keeping families together, helping families stay healthy, and repairing the damage that I'm sure they did not intentionally mean to put on their children. I believe that no parent wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to abuse my child today. No parent, no parent, no matter what they're going through, says that. There's always factors that play into it. I just, I wanted to continue back to talking about the ACEs and how growing up in a toxic environment, what I saw come out in me at the age of 17. I left the house, and I my automatic response to any loud sound or somebody yelling or anything was I was startled and broken down into a panic. Panic just filled my body, and I now know that was even long after I left my house. I was still in fright or flight mode, and that's what my body's response was. I to the toxic stress that I experienced for 17 years. My body was trying to adjust to a real world out there, but my mind was nowhere close to knowing what I was supposed to do in order to do that. And because of that, I went through a lot of unfortunate things happened because because of that toxic stress, I had a loss of identity, just out there trying to figure out who I am as a person that was taken away from me as a child. In fact, still to this day at 43, I'm still struggling on how to manage my own emotions, and just learning who I am as a person. I think that learning about the ACEs and how a person is affected by them has brought so much into light for me and has helped my healing process. And in turn, it has lit a fire in me to go out and do service with families more passionately and with more heart. Yeah.
How would somebody do an ACEs test?
You can go online
Okay.
and just type in ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. There's a lot of information online. Yeah. I really made the decision to talk about it today because, like I said, it opened my eyes, and I'm hoping that maybe out there somewhere, I guess my challenge to listeners is that if somebody does go online or hear this podcast and just hear the information I'm giving, I challenge them to just speak out for one child, just one. Hear them and help them, and don't be afraid. Don't just sweep it underneath the rug, because it's not going to go away. The only way it's going to go away in our lifetime is by speaking out and shining a light on such a dark subject. Don't be afraid of how it's going to affect you as a person. Be afraid of how it's going to affect the child, and in turn, like the ripple effect, affect the rest of our community.
So what are some of the resources that you would recommend?
So right here, Oneida Social Services, they, I don't have any of the phone numbers on me right now, but anyone can go online and get the information. Type in Oneida Social Services, Indian Child Welfare, or ICW department. There is a multitude of highly intelligent, highly amazing workers here that would be willing to help anybody. if somebody isn't willing to contact Oneida Social Services, there's a lot of resources within the community, and Brown County CPS, Child Protection, would be somebody that they can turn to. If there is a crisis situation, there is a crisis number.
Yeah, and I think with Oneida, we're pretty fortunate as far as like resources. We have our own, mental health, not facility, but we have, counseling
Behavioral.
services, and then we also have Cultural Heritage, who does, they do more traditional healing, and then we also have, resources here in the building as far as like economic support to help, with financially, if and there's also, for example, there's we have relatives who take care of their relatives, which is like kinship. So to avoid, or it's kind of more like a prevention piece, so that if parents are struggling and they need support or help caring for their children, kinship is relatives are always like the first place that we want. We want to keep Native kids connected in the community and with their families as much as possible, and that is one of the main goals and purposes of our area and any child welfare is to keep the families together and and with foster care is keeping them in the community, keeping them connected to their culture. So
in fact, it is a requirement per the Indian Child Welfare Act, and we take that act very seriously. And we know, because of like what Byron was talking about earlier with the boarding homes, and that and actually that's where the Indian Child Welfare first came into effect. After those boarding homes were beginning to close down, governments brought about the act, and we uphold that act, and we work it every single day, and we take it very seriously. We strive to keep the Indian children with their families.
And do you want to explain what the act is a little bit, the Indian Child Welfare Act, ICWA?
So the Indian Child Welfare Act, okay, if I get some numbers wrong, I'm sorry for somebody out there, but I believe it was 1974 that it came about. This act came about because of, basically, like I said, what was happening in the boarding homes. Families were literally being ripped apart. Children were dying in the foster homes without being able to see their families, and there was just it was a tragedy. It was nothing less than a tragedy. So I don't remember the history on how it ended. If you got that information, you can help me out. But that's when the Indian Child Welfare came into act to help keep those families together.
I think that's part of its purpose as well, is to keep children connected to their culture and community, because they were, whether how you were talking about with social workers were intervening, that they were used as kind of a tool to separate families, and that would play out by children going into being shipped, or not shipped, but moved to outside of the community with non-native either foster homes
families,
and so then and we still see, I know that I still see this as an adult, people who were, they call it adopted out, meaning they're adopted away from the community. They have this disconnect, and they also have these it's like an identity, their struggle with their identity, because they were raised a certain way, but they a lot of times want to know about who they are, and then it can be a struggle for them to come back and reconnect, because they're so disconnected. And so part of Indian Child Welfare Act was to stop that from happening, kind of a protection, so that specifically for Native children, that their communities could intervene and make sure that they're connected with within their community, whether it's a relative or another tribal member in our community, or somebody who lives, who is connected. So yeah, that's
our first choice is always family.
yeah.
So a great need, and I guess this is just a shout out here, a great need for foster homes within our tribal community is
that's definitely needed.
really needed.
So how would you, so for people that are listening that don't really know much about like seeing child abuse or understanding or identifying it, how would you describe to them, or say if you were talking to somebody and saying and they wanted to know, well, I think that this might be happening, how would you explain to them that how to recognize signs of abuse, or if they, or what they should do if they do see something that makes them concerned, I guess?
Well, I would like to say that if somebody has a feeling in their gut that something is not right, they should always, if they have that thought where they say, should I report this? They should report it. A person does not need to be a mandated reporter to file a report. They could call Brown County CPS and file a report, and their name will stay anonymous. Anonymous. I never say that right.
That's okay.
So their information will stay confidential. So, and I think that is just a taboo issue too, is people are scared. People are scared to step out and make that call. People don't know that their information is going to stay confidential, but in fact, some people might say, well, the worker told me that it was so and so, or the worker told me that it was you, but that is absolutely not true. Never believe if that happens. So I definitely say to people, well, what do you think? Such and such happened. Should I report? If you're asking that question, you should report. It's not a person's job to define the type of abuse that's happening. That is the job of the child protection worker and the courts and the police departments. But I believe that every person in our society has a duty to make a report if they suspect something is happening.
So how would they suspect it? Like seeing signs, like bruises or marks, or is there anything that you would suggest?
Yeah, so especially with little boys, you always got bruises going on. They're always falling. They're always scraping their knees and stuff like that. Sometimes it's hard to spot. So, in fact, that's really something that I wanted to focus on today, is talking about what it is we can look for, some definite signs of abuse and neglect.
Okay.
So that's a good question, Leah.
So what about like especially when kids talk, some kids could be real talkative. What are some of the key words we should be looking for?
I think, every child is going to be different, and children tell stories. We know that. But when they're telling stories with specific details, say it's a sexual abuse situation, if they're telling details on what a male part or a female part looks like, and they're 3 years old and they really shouldn't know that kind of information, it's definitely a red flag. When they're telling stories about how long they sat into a closet and waited for their dinner to come, or how long mom left and they were home by themselves, I think that you can tell sometimes what is a story and what is true by the way some children tell it.
And sometimes I think that it's also, if they're telling, it's probably, even if to put that judgment in a person's hand is kind of hard. So if you're not sure, then I would say call and report it anyway, because that way it can be figured out, if it's, it might be nothing, but it could be something. And so if you're not sure, it's probably just but you do have an inclination, or you do seem a little bit concerned, or that you do see a mark on them, or they are talking about something and you're not sure if it's a story or if it's true, it's best to just call and report it, because they can sort that out and find out whether it's true or not. And you'd hate to be I'd hate to know and not do anything about it, and something worse happens.
Yeah, definitely.
And that instead of calling and then it being nothing, I would feel okay with that. If I call and it was nothing, okay, well, at least it was looked into.
Yeah.
But if I did nothing about it and something else happened or it got worse, that would feel horrible, and I would feel guilty about that. So I would suggest that if you are concerned, listen to your gut and call and make a report and let them sort it out. Here, so I don't know off the top of my head what the counties, because we work with the counties that are in the area. So Brown County, Outagamie County. I'm not sure what their numbers are, but I know that our number is 490-3700, and they can connect you with somebody who can take a report and sort it out.
And maybe we can add those other numbers on somewhere in the podcast.
So we'll have those numbers listed down in the description or attached with the post with the correct facilities and agencies and their numbers associated with them.
Okay. Well, I don't want to bore the listeners too much, but I just kind of want to go through the types of abuse and neglect. In fact, abuse and neglect are separate, but just go through them and to speak out. What is it, and what do they look like? What does it look like? So, I'm just gonna. The first one is physical abuse, and physical abuse is intentional. It can be burning or scalding, suffocating or drowning, poisoning, intentional poisoning of a child, shaking, throwing, hitting, biting, non-consensual tickling. That's one that some people don't see as abuse, but when a child is being tickled and they don't want to be tickled, that's against their will. Excessive pinching, slapping, tripping, any other types of physical harm, or trying to force a child into a stressed position. Some of these things sound.
What does that mean?
Well, if a child is forced into a closet or a dog kennel or tied into certain positions.
Okay.
Some stories, I'm sure that some people out there have heard some very scary stories of children being forced into positions that a child shouldn't be in, forced into trunks, boxes. So it goes on to, children who are being withheld from food or medicine or proper sleep are all forms of physical abuse.
So I like this here that it talks about like what it looks like. So like could be bruises, welts on the face, or neck, chest, back, injuries in the shape of an object.
I just want to interject there is like, I talked about how sometimes physical abuse can be hard because we see children with bruises on them all the time. And we can't just go around reporting every time we see a child with a bruise. So when you say bruises or welts, I really wanted to specify on the face, the neck, the chest, or the back. Think about areas where if you were to fall, you're not going to be bruised. Like you're not going to get a bruise on the inside of your arm. You're not going to get a bruise on the inside of your thighs. There's certain places around your cheeks, and there's certain shapes of bruises that if you see them, you think, oh, that's definitely a hand or that's definitely some fingers. So, yeah.
Or a belt or a cord.
Yeah.
Or a spoon.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, Leah.
No,
go ahead.
Okay. Well, just like unexplained burns on palms of your hands, soles of your feet, back, a delay in seeking medical help, Also, extremes in behavior, like they're very aggressive or withdrawn or shy. Um, I think we've both probably seen these kinds of behaviors in kiddos.
Mm-hmm.
Afraid to go
Mm-hmm.
home. Maybe they have unexplained black eyes. How you're talking about with little kids and little boys who have bruises.
Yeah,
It
because
just
they're
it
so rowdy.
even if they were getting a black eye from another kid, that's still something you want to
Yeah.
report. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I think any kind of black eye would probably be something that you want to
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
report. And also maybe like broken bones, bruises, bite marks, burns that don't fit a story, that they're telling you.
Yeah, you got to pay attention to the story.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't match the bruise or the what's happening, then and it raises a red flag.
Also, like protesting or crying when they're going to go to a particular location. Maybe they're going home or to school or another place where abuse might be happening, or if they're frightened of a specific individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are some good signs to look for.
Um, so then we will go into sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is defined as any act that forces or entices a child or young person to participate in any type of sexual activity. Even if even if it's seen that a child never asked to be touched in places.
Mm-hmm.
So, some people, I hear often that a 13 or even a 12, a young child might be liking it. That is not true.
Mhm.
If you know that is happening, it needs to be reported.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's violent or even if it's not violent, if it doesn't seem that violent, any type of touching is not okay. So if the child is forced or invited to participate in any activity that causes the other to be aroused, this is considered sexual abuse. And those activities can include assault by penetration, such as rape or oral sex. And it could be non-penetrating sexual activities, such as touching outside the clothes or rubbing or kissing or even masturbating. Watching others perform sometimes in these situations, the children are asked to watch others perform sexual acts. Looking at images, sexual images, videos, or toys, or any other material. Even a child doesn't need to hear dirty jokes, sexual jokes. Children who are children who see people's like forced to see other people's genitals, not okay.
Like you said before, a child should not be able to describe what a genital area looks like on an adult.
Yeah. They need to learn about sex in a healthy way, and these are not healthy ways. These are activities that could distort an individual's mind for the rest of their life. It's just devastating. Sometimes the sexual abuse happens with both males and females. Sometimes it's siblings. A lot of times it is family members, but oftentimes it could be somebody who's not so close to the children. It could happen at any age, even before puberty. So some signs of sexual abuse might be a child's talking about the sexual activity, like I had said before. The child's displaying sexual knowledge that's just bizarre and crazy, and there's just information that they should not have in their head at their age. The child may be withdrawing from friends and other people and running away from home. The child might be shying away from another person and showing fear. The child, oftentimes in sexual abuse, we see a child who has been potty trained for years and years start having accidents in their bed. And that's both wetting and pooping. That's both. changes in their mood or appetite. And children, if we see definitely any STDs in children before like or a pregnancy before puberty, it's definitely for sure a red flag. And a lot of times we'll see children who are not able to sit down comfortably. We'll see staining in their underwear that's not appropriate. Those are all red flags of sexual abuse.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about neglect? What is neglect?
Sure. I mean, no.
Okay.
You do it.
I was just talking so much here. All right, guys. So neglect is when a parent or caregiver persistently fails to meet the child's basic needs, both physically and psychologically. And neglect happens very, very often. Sometimes I see it happening more often than physical abuse or any of the other types of abuse. And it drastically impacts their health and it delays their development. Neglect can involve not being able to have appropriate healthy foods to eat, clothing to wear, or getting proper medical care. Neglect can be a child being locked in a room or a closet. It's not having adequate shelter. And this includes children being abandoned and excluded from other family members. It's just scary. I've seen that where one child is being excluded, where locked in a room while other children get to open Christmas presents, and it's hard to understand. But so placing children in a situation that they might experience some emotional or physical harm. That's neglect. Or leaving them alone for a long period of time so that they can harm themselves. I mean, we can't expect a vulnerable child, like a child at the age of 2 or 3, to stay home by themselves and cook themselves dinner. That's definitely neglect. Some signs for us to look at when some signs might be having missing their dental appointments, missing their medical appointments, where we see a lot of children with a lot of teeth that are missing or rotten or broken off, having unwashed hair, clothes, their skin is not being taken care of. Neglect can be seen in cases where there's a lot of drug use. Children exposed to drugs and alcohol is something we see very often. Children testing positive for high levels of methamphetamines and other type of drugs has been common. So I've seen kiddos in school hoarding their lunches because they know that's the only food they're going to get for that day. So instead of throwing it away, where the school wants the children to throw away their tray and not keep, I've seen kids hoard that food. And when I ask them, they say, well, I need it for later. So children not getting that proper food is, and that's another, children who are not able to go to school because of the pandemic yeah.
And as far as hoarding food, foster parents see that a lot as well. When the kids come into their homes, that's one of their behaviors or whatever, is especially when they're first go to a foster home, is they will hoard food and hide food because they're not. It's a habit that they probably formed while they were living at home, and they're not sure when their next meal is going to be.
And I talked about having that sense of identity in children. When that's taken away from them and they're given an opportunity to have something that's their own, and that might just be food, um, is another reason for them to hoard it too. It's their own, and they don't want they've been in situations where what they have has been taken away from them,
It's something they have control over.
and to have the control. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As far as the pandemic, like, how did you see that all of child abuse play out? Because I know for me, well, I don't know that it particularly affected foster care, but I know that working with some of the case managers, they had talked about that it was eerily quiet. Like, there wasn't many reports coming in because kids were not in school. And so it kind of gave that false sense of like, oh, well, things are
Okay.
or things must be fine, but really what was happening
There was
is
no
that
mandated
there was no mandated
reporters.
reporters. So a lot of times reports come from teachers, social workers at school, staff at the school who see something that's alarming, and they are mandated reporters. So when they're seeing the kids every day, there was reports like usual. And then when the pandemic hit and when kids were at home, a lot of the case managers had said that it was there was barely anything, and it was the main, and their fear and our fear was that it was still happening, but the kiddos weren't getting help. They were stuck in those situations.
Yeah. And that is true. I feel like there was a low point. So my position doesn't work directly with incoming calls, incoming reports, but I do know there was a low point. And then all of a sudden, there was a very big spike, and there were just tons of calls coming in, and I guess I can't I can't pinpoint exactly what the increase where it came from, was caused by, but I have to think that man, there's parents out there losing jobs that they've had for years, under stress of losing their homes, not knowing where their next meal is coming from. There's just so many stresses out there that a parent is dealing with, and let alone having 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children home all day long.
Yeah.
It's just
and then
there's
having
a lot
to
of
become
stress.
a teacher, and having
taking on roles that they weren't used to.
Yeah, that they're just not equipped for. I mean, I know that I wouldn't be able to teach my son schoolwork, and I have a master's degree. I mean, it was just everyday life, I think, was kind of impacted and amplified even more so when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And it also became hard for kiddos who were in foster care as well too. Even being able to see their parents was a challenge as well because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so there was always concern about health and safety and being and so trying to come up with some ways that they could still see their parents.
Oh, we've had to think of some creative.
Yeah.
We had some creative thinking since the pandemic
we
around
really had
here.
to be very creative about a lot of things. But because when kiddos aren't seeing their when kiddos aren't seeing their parents, then that impacts them as well, and that causes behaviors, and it causes them to act out, and
you also see parents going backwards. Where parents that are doing good for so long, and then all of a sudden they're not seeing their kids on a regular basis anymore, and they're backsliding to some things that got the children taken away to begin with.
Yeah.
And
trying to manage stress the only way they know how. Unfortunately, and so it impacts and it trickles down. It's
that ripple.
Yeah.
The ripple in the water. It really, if you could picture it, when I put that challenge out there for listeners, just to speak out for one child, and that will stop just one ripple, and maybe two then, or three, and you just increase that ripple, and eventually, it's my hope that within my lifetime, I will see child abuse and neglect non-existent. I know, I was, when I was talking about neglect, I did think about how I understand how it would be easy to sweep neglect under the rug. I understand. Parents who only know what they know until they know what they know to change how, maybe they think it's okay to lock the door and keep their kid in their room because they think they're keeping their child safe. And I think that that just goes to show the importance of education. How locking your child in their bedroom is not keeping them safe. It's isolating them from a world that they need to learn and grow and develop with. So parents just really, some parents just need that piece of education. I really advocate for parenting education for everybody. Like I tell my kids, before you have kids, take a parenting class. I think I told you that once. But yeah.
Or get a puppy.
Yeah.
Get a puppy.
But yeah. So there's all kinds of things that can make a parent cause a parent to cross that line and harm their child. What goes through each individual person's mind, I can't say. I'm not that person, but there's untreated mental health, there's substance abuse, alcohol abuse, addictions. Addiction is the devil.
It's probably the main cause of why kids are in care right now.
I'd say 97% of cases are there's some sort of addiction involved or mental health, but addiction is higher than mental health. It's terrible.
And probably the main. So as far as like neglect is concerned, that's probably the leading cause for sure of why kids are in care, or because they're using
a type of drug use, or alcohol, or both. We the stress, we talked about the stress of the pandemic, but everyday stress is enough to cause parents over that line. A lot of parents we see just don't have a solid support system, and I hear all the time, I don't need anybody, I have my husband. Or some parents might rely on their kids for a support system, which is not a healthy relationship. But having a solid support system is important for parents. A lot of times parents just don't have the finances that they need, and they become homeless. And like we already talked about, a lot of times they just don't know any other way.
So do we have any closing remarks, anything that you want to add before we go?
So we talked about physical abuse, we talked about sexual abuse. I think the only type of abuse that we did not cover was emotional abuse, which can be a type of neglect too. I think neglect can encompass all these different types of abuse. So we kind of, we talked about a child that's being left in the other room while the other children of the family get to unwrap Christmas presents. Just an example. Can be a type of emotional abuse. Calling the child names, nasty names. That's a type of emotional abuse. I'd like to say, if you never tell your child that you love them, that's a type of emotional abuse. I've seen that. So I think we probably pretty much did cover everything. I think Byron can add some phone numbers on
Just that
some
if you're call,
contact.
if you see anything, I would say um, just call, and
Hmm.
if you're not sure.
If you question yourself, should I report this? Then get on the phone and report it.
Hmm.
If you have a feeling in your gut that something's not right, then that's something telling you you need to report it.
Yeah, and it's not none of your business. It is your business. We're a community,
Mm-hmm.
and Oneida people are. That's always been our way. Is we are a community and we help each
Mm-hmm.
other, and so you're helping that family and you're helping that child if you do call, um,
Yeah.
and then the parents can get the help that they need as well.
But the the children are our business. The children, like I said before, are our future. They're
Mhm.
the foundation of our society.
Mhm.
If we're not raising them upright, then what do we have? What future do we have to look to? So it really is a call out to everyone to take it seriously, bring it out into the light, and just shine a bright light on it. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's it's something that needs to be needs a light to shine on it.
Alrighty. Thank you for giving us all the information, sharing your time, and also thank you for listening.
Yes,
Okay,
thank
thank you.
you.
Yep.